Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Project Insulin podcast. We don't have a name for it yet, so we'll figure it out at some point. Today I'm with Leia. Leia and I met in Providence, Rhode Island because we worked in the same building. Actually, we worked in the same space for a while, but I will let you do intros. Tell us about who you are, what you do, passions, whatever it is you want to share before we start talking about diabetes.
Sure. Hello. Thank you for having me, Eric. I'm really excited to be here. I love talking about diabetes. I am a type 1 diabetic myself. I was diagnosed when I was 8 years old. I'm 28 now, so I'm 20 years now. It's very, very exciting. Big number. Yeah, so I definitely have a lot of things to say, but for my background, I currently work in kind of the entrepreneurship ecosystem here in Rhode Island. I work for a company called NEMIC, New England Medical Innovation Center, which was a very serendipitous kind of hiring because I had fallen in love with entrepreneurship and supporting founders in the community. And I also have a really personal connection to medical devices, literally connected to one all day. And then my educational background, I have my bachelor's in biology. It really was the perfect triad, if you will. So, yeah, that's my background. Otherwise, non-related to work, I really enjoy spending time with my friends and family. I'm originally from Connecticut, but I lived in Maine for several years where I met my partner, and most of my community is up there. I have a lot of fondness for traveling and visiting them. Yeah, that's a little bit about me. I have a dog and a cat who are both kind of crazy and weird, but yeah, that's my background. I like to garden and bake and spend time on the water, anything by the water or adjacent, whether it's going to the beach or camping by a lake. Those are usually my favorite things to do.
I didn't know some of these things. I didn't know you
Oh,
did a bachelor's in biology.
yes,
I didn't put it together. Yeah.
that's
So 20 years, that's a
yeah,
long time.
it is.
Do you remember what diagnosis time was like? You know, people have shared their stories and it's all similar but different.
It's a specific story that's been told many times in my family, actually. I was diagnosed when I was 8 years old, and at the time, my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, who did a lot of my upbringing, that's where I would go after school and things like that. I was very close with my maternal grandmother. She had type 2 diabetes, which we all know it's a very different disease, but similar symptoms a lot of the time. And she had noticed, age old story, that I had been peeing and drinking a lot. And so it was summertime, and I was getting ready to go to my pediatrician for my camp physical, because you have to, for summer camp, you have to have a physical saying you're healthy or you got your shots or whatever. She mentioned to my mom, hey, Leia's been peeing and drinking a lot. You should just have him check her urine or whatever, test just to make sure maybe something's going on. And she had the idea that it could be diabetes, and she was a smart lady. So they checked my urine and it's full of ketones. Then they sent me to get some blood done, and that was also full of sugar. Yeah, the rest is history. I specifically remember sitting in the back seat of my mom's old white Dodge minivan going to my pediatrician. And looking back, it's so funny. I was eating a box of Kix cereal before all this. I'm like, of course my blood sugar was high. Not only was my pancreas not working, but I'm like downing carbs on the way to this. I have a vivid memory of that. But yeah, all after that, everything kind of came back. Yeah, you should go see an endocrinologist. And we went up to, shout out, Connecticut Children's Medical Center.
Okay.
That's who I saw for endo for most of my life until I was an adult, because they only do peds. And they were lovely. I met mostly with, throughout my time there, a nutritionist, actually, because we vibed so well. Her name was Trish. She was also a type 1 diabetic,
Oh.
and she was like invaluable to me and my family. And she just was such a good resource, so supportive for my parents, because she grew up with it and now she's a grown up with kids. And
Yeah.
so like she like reassured them it's going to be okay. I can do it. She can do it. Technology is only going to improve, and it has.
Yeah.
So a lot of really, guardian angels along the path
Yeah.
there for multiple reasons. But yeah, that's my story of diagnosis. And then we just ran with it. I'm very fortunate. Both of my parents are somewhat involved in the medical world. My dad still is very active as volunteer EMTs. So they knew what the worst case scenario could be if there was an emergency and how to handle it. And I think I'm very lucky for that because it meant that I always felt safe and confident and protected when my parents were around. And then that kind of grew and developed into any time, I felt like I had the confidence to always be okay, even if there was an emergency.
That's really interesting. I think so. We just had our Pi Day celebration, which Leia was at. So thank you for coming and supporting. And when we were there, we had two separate parents. So two parents of two different kids. One was a college kid, and one has like a 4-year-old or an 8-year-old, something like that. I wasn't a part of this conversation, but I was later told that the one with the younger child was so nervous and stressed about her daughter's diabetes.
Yeah.
And she felt a little alleviated because the older parent was there. There was, I think, 4 or 5 people with type 1 who were just adults, right? Living full lives. I can only imagine what it's like to, not know about diabetes and have to take care of a young child. To all of you parents out there who are dealing with this and have a young child, it does get better and they become great adults like Leia.
Yeah. Thank you. No, I can't even fathom how that feels. I think even for my parents who were well educated in that sector, it's still, everyone's different. And then I think a big transitional point for me was when I wasn't at home anymore, when I went off to college, and they just had to trust that. And I think any parent deals with that when their kid goes off to college, but then with a chronic illness, it's even more so. You just have to trust that you've raised your kid well and taught them the tools they need to get by, and they're going to take care of themselves. And I'm the first person to say, I'm not perfect. I am a very bad diabetic a lot of the times, but I do know what I need to do to take care of myself. And my parents definitely supported me in learning those skills.
The thing that was curious for me, and I don't know if you remember this part, because this might be a question you haven't gotten, but you are right before summer camp.
Yeah.
When this happens. Did you end up going to summer camp, and what was that like? Your first time dealing with this and you're off somewhere else?
Yes. So I do remember going to camp. I don't remember if it was right after this or if my parents were like, we'll wait, we'll let this we'll get situated with this first, but I don't remember specifically, but I did spend many summers in summer camp. And I have specific memories of getting walked down to the nurse's office or whoever was the health point of contact at camp, wherever I was, and having to do a site, test my blood sugar, all that sort of thing. I would always have to go check in with them at least once a day. Depending on the camp, it was like lunch or dinner time, something like that. And I always felt both special because I got like special attention, but then also self-conscious, which I think is the case for many people when you have an illness or something that requires a little more attention. It's like, I have a special light on me, but also I have a light on me and I don't really want it. But it depends on the day and how you're feeling about yourself and your self-confidence, which also evolves with age. When you're a preteen, you don't want anyone to look at you. So having a special light on you is even worse. And the same can be said for school, going to the nurse's office at lunchtime. I remember making friends with the other diabetics and like, hey, how's your sugar today? It's a party too. Do you need a bolus? So stuff like that. But yeah, I definitely went to summer camp. Shout out again to my parents. They were very much so insistent that I have access to every activity that other kids would, despite needing a little more hand-holding for certain things. And they sent me to overnight camps and things like that. And I think this was all in preparation as to what I was talking about before with sending me off on my very own. It's a good kind of trial experience. Like, you got to take care of yourself and you have backup if you need it. But this is kind of your make it or break it moment to prove that you can take care of yourself. And it's like a privilege almost. But yes, I did get to go to summer camp, and I'm really grateful I did because it did give me those skills again. So.
Yeah. And it's interesting to hear you talk about the attention, right? Like you now have a little bit more attention, but you said that you have the help available. You need it, but you have to also work on your own. a very important skill in my world is asking for help, right? And I'm curious, that is a skill I've learned as, with no pressure. Like if I don't ask for help, then I just don't get something done, right? Like for you, there's a different level of like necessity, and the repercussions are much larger potential.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And like you said, this could be a little therapy session here, this call, and you're totally right. Because I'm thinking about it now, and it's funny this comes up because I was just talking with my partner Riley about this last night. I was in a sour mood, and he had asked me for help with dinner, and I was like, "Oh, I never ask for help when I make dinner. All high and mighty on like my little martyr horse." And then I'm like standing there thinking about it. I'm like, there's nothing wrong with that. And so I absolutely am guilty of not asking for help because I feel like, and it depends, it's a two-sided coin. It's either I feel like I should be able to handle it myself, and so I put that pressure on myself, or I don't want to ask for help at all and I just don't want to bother someone with it. So it comes from a couple different angles, but I will say when it comes to diabetes, usually I do not want to put that burden on someone else. And I feel very anxious about asking for help. And it's usually very simple things. And I'm getting better at being like, hey, could you do this or do that? Like sometimes when I'm driving, I'll need to bolus, or I'm like, oh, my blood sugar is going up. I need a little insulin. And Riley or someone will be in the passenger seat. And I'm like, hey, give me 20 carbs here. And it's something that I could easily do myself and drive a little more dangerously. Or I'm sitting on the couch and I ran out of insulin in the middle of the night and I feel like crap and I need to give myself an actual injection or change my site or something like that. And I have gotten a lot better at asking for help, but it takes practice. It's like flexing a muscle or strength training, and you have to actively do it sometimes, and then I think it just becomes second nature. But it feels like a burden. It feels like a burden to me, and I have no say in the matter. So why would I want to put that on someone else? It's also, that's silly because the people around you in your life love you and care about you and want you to feel good. It's like if I have a headache, I'm going to ask someone to grab me a bottle of Advil. If my blood sugar's high and I can't handle it on my own for some reason or low or something, I'm going to ask you to grab me some peanut butter crackers. There's really no harm in that.
I have a vivid memory of when we got the billboard for Project Insulin. You were like, you're so good at asking. And this is like the first time I'm putting it together. But yeah, you've done this your whole life. Like maybe you haven't thought of it from a professional standpoint, but yeah, like you too can get billboards, Leia.
Okay, say less. No, that's awesome. That's a great perspective. You are good at asking, and that wouldn't have happened if you didn't just ask. There's really no harm in that.
Yeah.
And that goes for any situation. There's no harm in asking,
Yeah, that's very interesting.
As an 8-year-old child.
Well, I'm going to say it. You are engaged.
I am engaged. Yes, I am.
To Riley.
Yes, to Riley.
And you have a wedding coming up. And I had not thought about this till we started talking. How has diabetes trickled into wedding planning?
That's a fun question. So for one, my wedding dress has pockets, which is very exciting. Not that was intentional because I knew I would need access to anything, but I'm very excited that I'll be able to, and oftentimes when you have a wedding dress and things like that, you have a lot of alterations to bring it in here because it's a fancy, expensive dress and you want it to fit perfectly. One of the alterations I want to do is have one of my pockets have like an inside little opening so I can put my pump in there. So I can access that. That's kind of a fun thing. And then just planning out snacks too throughout the day. I know people when they get married, the age-old story is you're not going to eat on your wedding day. And I'm like, well, that's not really an option for me. Yeah. I need to eat. Otherwise, I won't remember my wedding day for like not fun reasons. Yeah, just planning out snacks. And this is one of those moments where I like absolutely prioritize myself as a bride. And, everyone's like, oh, bridezilla. And I'm like, well, not really. That's not what's happening here. I just know I'm going to want snacks. Yeah. And drinking too, taking into account that alcohol and diabetes is always a little different. Fortunately, I don't have any really bad reactions with alcohol. I know some people have to really account for their insulin and drinking and things like that. I'm fortunate I don't have too much of a problem with that. But that kind of stuff I'm thinking about in advance, and just having insulin, having the go bag for things,
Mhm.
worst case scenario if my pump fails, stuff like that you're already worried about a million and one other things as you're planning your wedding day. It's like one more little thing, but you
Mhm.
just fold it in with all the other planning. I'm trying to think. No one's asked me this question about my diabetes and my wedding. So it's just that little thing in the back of my head that's always there. I'm
Yeah,
like, okay, it's not about me.
yeah.
Well, it is about me,
It is about you.
but like everything I do and all of my health and well-being impacts the people in my life. And I think that's
Mhm.
always been both a burden and a motivation for me, because oftentimes when I'm burnt out of my diabetes, which is usually like 23/6, not 24/7, but pretty close. Um, if I need an external motivator, it's
Mhm.
the people around me and being able to support them.
Talk to me about what makes your support system great. Like, what about the people who are in your life who don't have diabetes, who are the people that you lean on, who help you, who you want to stay healthy for because they depend on you as well?
Yeah, my parents always, and my whole extended family has always been really invested in my health and well-being. Like my uncle, I remember my uncle Chuck, he always used to be angry, not at me, but just in general, when I would have an endocrinology appointment and come back
Mhm.
and my A1C wasn't good. He was like,
Mhm.
oh, come on. Again, not at me. It was never like
Yeah.
I wasn't doing a good job, but they just care so much. And that's always so
Mhm.
sweet. So I'm very fortunate to be very close with my family and friends. And even Riley's family now, his grandmother is type 2. And I think his grandfather is too. I can't remember, but they're both, health conscious, older generation, and they know enough about it. And so his whole family is always very concerned. And they're like, are you taking care of your diabetes? They're checking in. I'm used to it now from my whole family. But it was a funny transition when I had been dating this guy for long enough and our families were melding, and then those boundaries break down of like niceties, and they're like, you need to take care of yourself, we care about you, and it's like this like aggressiveness, and you're like, oh, okay, this is real now. So I'm lucky to have his family too, as people that love and support me.
Yeah.
um, and really just like I am very unashamed and open book about my diabetes. So everyone I meet, they see my CGM or they see my pump,
Mhm.
they're like, are you diabetic? And I'm like, yeah. And I tell them all about it. So I kind of just have this growing network of people who know I'm a diabetic. And in my
Mhm.
head, that means that they care about me. I don't think that's always the case, but I think human nature, people are good. So, and I could be wrong, but I like to believe that I'm not. So I like to think that anyone, I could, reach out to the person sitting across the room from me or whoever and be like,
Mhm.
hey, can you bring me this snack, or can you call this person for me? I do not feel well. And I'm just very not shy about it. And so I like to think that I have this network of humanity around me. And
Yeah.
maybe that boils down to my parents being emergency responders and knowing that there's always someone to call.
Yeah.
But no, I definitely build that network wherever I am, and I'm not afraid to share that and build that relationship with anyone.
Yeah.
My friends are very supportive. I think a lot of people around me, I don't necessarily want to go into the depth of educating them on like this is what's happening and this is why it's happening and this is what I need to fix it, blah blah blah. It's more so just managing. It's like my blood sugar is low. I need you to do this for me. And they're like,
Mhm.
yes, got it. And that's just normal, like how that works.
Yeah, it's you so work in entrepreneurship, funding earlier, project management.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Learn
well, I
how to,
appreciate you sharing.
yeah.
That was very informative. Um, I don't think I have anything else for us today. If there's anything you'd like to share, any feelings that popped up that you want to announce, or anything you're curious to tell people that I haven't asked you yet, last chance, and then we'll wrap it up.
I can't think of anything really. I think something, and I've alluded to this, is you really do have a network of people who want to support you. Humanity is good. And if you need help, just ask for it. And that is something I also need to hear myself. So I'm saying it aloud so that I'll hear it back to me someday on this recording.
Yeah.
But I think that goes for anyone, and it's so much easier said than done. But really all it boils down to is we can all be in the same boat, or what's the quote, we're all in the same storm but on different boats, or something like that. That's a quote somewhere. And I think that's especially the case with diabetics. One of my good friends, Mitchell, he is a type 1 as well. And he was my first friend that I met at college. We were orientation buddies together in the same orientation group as like 17, 18-year-olds. And he was not diabetic at the time. And then I was, obviously. And, whatever, we went to a health-focused school. So he was really educated on the topic, and he knew what diabetes was and how it worked. And then I want to say he was 21 and he was diagnosed. And he was actually diagnosed on a train down from Boston to, I think he was going to Waterford, Connecticut, which is a stone's throw from where I grew up. And he was actually admitted to the hospital that I was born at in New London. And my mom went and visited him at the hospital.
Oh.
And said she was like a little angel. He like woke up from this like medically induced nap, and my mom was there, and he like doesn't even remember what he said or what happened, but his story is just so much different than mine. But we always connect on certain things, which I love. But everyone's different. So I can preach my thoughts and feelings, but and I can say ask for help, or everyone is here to support you, but sometimes it doesn't feel that way, and everyone's situation is different. And I recognize that I have a privilege and I've had opportunities that others don't. So at the end of the day, you just have to do what's best for you. And sometimes that means prioritizing other things, and that's absolutely okay. And no one's perfect. So that's all I have to say.
Well, I appreciate you coming on and sharing. I think what's been very interesting with all these stories and all these interviews has been everyone has a different perspective, and the life experience, like you mentioned, is different. Some people are really focused on diet. Some people are focused on support networks. Some people are focused on other things, and no one has the right answer. And
we're all just making it through.
Exactly.
You just got to do what gets you through. So
Exactly. So again, thank you. Thank you everyone for coming and listening to another episode. If you enjoyed the episode, like it, share it, subscribe to the podcast. If you're interested in being on the podcast, you have a story that you'd like to share, your own either type 1 story or type 2 story, or your family members or a support system for someone, whatever. We're interested. We'd love to have you on. Thank you, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Eric. Thank you, Project Insulin.